When I first started looking at tiny PCs, I kept hearing the same story. You grab the cheapest mini tower you can find, it looks slick on the desk, you pop it into a port, and a month later you're staring at frozen screens and a fan that sounds like a jet engine. It's a classic case of buyer's remorse, spending a fraction of a full-size workstation's price only to discover it can't keep up with the real work you throw at it. That's why I dug deeper before hitting add to cart on the HP Z2 G1i. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question I wanted to answer was simple: does this mini form factor actually deliver the power and flexibility you need for serious productivity and light creative work, or is it just another compact box that will leave you wishing for a bigger machine? First off, the HP Z2 G1i sits in a chassis that's literally the size of a small pizza box. On paper that sounds like a win for anyone with limited desk real estate. Think of a tight home office or a shared cubicle where a full tower would dominate the space. In practice, the footprint is a genuine advantage. It slides onto the side of a monitor, under a standing desk, or even into a conference room without looking out of place. The small form factor also means the cable run is short, which is a subtle but satisfying convenience when you're trying to keep a clean, organized workspace. Now, let's talk about what powers this little beast. The heart of the Z2 G1i is an Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, a 16-core processor built on the latest architecture. Paired with 32GB of DDR4 memory and a 1TB SSD, the system feels quick the moment you boot it up. I ran a few typical workflows that most of us do daily, opening a dozen browser tabs, firing up Microsoft Office, and rendering a 1080p video in Adobe Premiere Pro. The machine handled those tasks without any noticeable lag. Even when I dropped a 10-minute 4K video render into the queue, the CPU kept the fan at a steady, moderate hum, and the render finished well within a reasonable time frame. For anyone who spends most of their day in spreadsheets, email, and occasional photo or video editing, this performance level is more than enough. Ports are another area where the Z2 G1i shines compared to other mini PCs. On the rear you'll find a full suite, 2 HDMI 2.1 outputs, a DisplayPort, a handful of USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports, and classic USB-A for legacy peripherals. The Ethernet port is gigabit, and there's also an optional SD card slot that can be added with a simple internal adapter if you need quick media transfers. What this means in daily life is you can connect 2 monitors, a fast external SSD, a keyboard, and still have room for a webcam or a USB-C dock for your phone. No need to juggle dongles or constantly swap cables, a solid convenience for anyone who values a tidy desk. Thermal performance is where many mini PCs stumble, but the Z2 G1i was designed with a robust cooling solution. The internal fan does ramp up under heavy CPU loads, but it never crosses into the territory of a noisy radiator. In a practical sense, if you're in an open office or a quiet home study, the fan remains under 35 dB most of the time, barely audible above the hum of a standard office fan. The system also runs cooler than many larger workstations when idle, which translates into a longer lifespan for internal components, something serious buyers appreciate. Upgradability is a point where the Z2 G1i actually feels a bit generous for a mini PC. The chassis opens up with a simple screwdriver, revealing slots for additional M.2 SSDs and a free DIMM slot. If you start to feel the 32GB of RAM is tight for more demanding multitasking, you can add another 16GB stick without needing to replace the whole board. Likewise, you can stack a second NVMe drive for faster scratch disk space. The only real limitation is that the graphics card is soldered. NVIDIA 16GB is more than enough for 2D design work and moderate 3D, but it's not a substitute for a dedicated workstation GPU if you plan to run heavy CAD simulations or high-resolution 3D rendering on a daily basis. So who should buy the HP Z2 G1i? If your workflow revolves around office productivity, light to moderate photo editing, video editing at 1080p or 4K preview, and you need a system that can sit discreetly on a small desk, this machine is a solid choice. It also makes sense for remote workers who want a powerful machine that won't take up much space in a hotel room or a shared office. Creative freelancers who need a reliable workhorse for everyday tasks, but who don't require the massive bandwidth of a full-size GPU, will find the included NVIDIA card sufficient for most raster graphics and motion graphics tasks. On the flip side, if you're a heavy 3D modeler, a game developer using real-time engines, or someone who needs to